Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of my podcast. Today's podcast is called The Matrix. And as usual, I'm going to begin this podcast with a quote. The Matrix is everywhere, it is all around us. It is a world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth, a prison for your mind. And this is a quote by Morpheus. Morpheus is one of the main characters in the Matrix, and he plays a very important part. The reason that we've kind of been diving into the Matrix here lately is because I'm reading a book, as I mentioned in a few podcasts ago, and it's a philosophical look into the Matrix. And I know the Matrix is very entertaining. It's action packed, and it has a good storyline. It's a good trilogy, but there's also some things that the Matrix touches on that if we take a closer look into, we can see examples of it in society and ideas and concepts that if we reflect upon them, we can achieve a deeper meaning. And that goes with most movies. Like, not all movies are just action packed or funny. Usually, there's a message to the movie, like some type of message, like climate change or peace over war, or I mean, there's millions of different types of messages. Some are just meant to be educational and to keep in the forefront of our minds events that have taken place so that we don't forget. Because if you forget your history, you're destined to repeat your mistakes. And but the Matrix is just a look at life as a construct, like the aspects of life, the foundation, and the things that make up life at its core, and how life has evolved over time. And the funny thing is, like, when you look into the Matrix and you like get down to the core of the Matrix and you start breaking down the philosophical principles behind the Matrix and stuff like that, it's really nothing new. Like, these are principles that Socrates and Plato and Kant and like people like that have already broken down and wrote about previously in our history, like ages and ages ago. It's just you have to look at the Matrix in that way and kind of fashion your thinking to look that way, kind of guide yourself that way to recognize it. But once you recognize it, it's readily available. I always heard the saying, there's nothing new under the sun. So when I see these correlations, or I read these books and they make these correlations between, ancient knowledge and present day information, it's just like, wow, it just reiterates the fact that there really is nothing new under the sun. Um, the Matrix is a movie which suggests that everyone has the individual responsibility to make the choice between the real world and the artificial world. For those of you who haven't seen The Matrix, basically the machines have taken over the world, and they use human beings as a battery source to power themselves. Um, so in order to be able to harness this, they have people placed in these containers, and these containers help sustain their lives, and basically the people are kept in a dream state for all of their lives. And the Matrix is the construct that basically the machines have made for their mind, that creates a reality for them so they can stay in that state of you know sleep, basically. And it's their mind that's interacting with the Matrix, but their body is not present. It's not real. It's a construct made by the machine. And a lot of that we can see in real life. Like, a lot of that actually exists in real life. It's not that so much that we're asleep in the sense of physical sleep, but we're asleep as in the sense of our awareness isn't as optimal as it should be. It's not picking up on the little intricacies and the little details in the minutia of simple everyday phenomena like the media and the things they say and the things that are happening around us, to show us that reality isn't really what the media is painting it to be. Social media is painting it to be. Um, all these movie stars and actresses are making it to be, because it's actually something quite different. And that's why when we see these famous people that have everything in the world, but they still commit suicide, they still have depression, they're still battling anxiety and stuff like that, because at the end of the day, we're all human, and you can only fake it for so much. But true happiness, or true contentment, or true satisfaction, true tranquility is not achieved by the mere acquisition of physical things like money or cars or houses. And it's not achieved by intangible things either, like in the sense of fame, or seeking other people's approval. It comes from knowing who you are, and accepting who you are, and living your purpose, living your dreams, living what you were put on this earth to do. And that journey, that quest, is how you can achieve tranquility, how you can achieve peace, instead of living this false reality where you care about how many likes you get, and how many people care about what you're doing, like on Twitter and stuff like that. I mean, it's fine and dandy, but for you to participate in, but for you to bet your life and your existence around that type of stuff, it's like the Matrix. It's a construct. It's not real. Much like the movie, we have the same choices to make in everyday life. Every day you wake up, you have a choice. You can participate in the Matrix, or you can choose not to. We have such outlets in our society today that tell us what to do and construct the world around us, or how we envision the world around us. The media tells us, if you pay attention to the media constantly tells you bad news, because good news doesn't sell. So they tell you about earthquakes, corruption, tornadoes, snowstorms, all types of stuff. It's rarely good news. And they try to shape what we think, like about politics, about foreign policy, about a certain person, a certain action somebody's taken, what should be in style, what shouldn't be. And that's forming the Matrix. That's the construct, if you choose to believe it. And I'm not telling you what to believe and what not to believe, because if you believe that that's accurate and you believe that your sources are reliable, then that's perfectly fine. You chose to believe them. As for me, I always take a deeper look into what's being said, what information is being passed. I try to draw my own conclusions based on the information that I can identify, I can find. Because one of the greatest things that I learned in college was not so much the content of my degree or any specialization or anything like that. And this education that I'm about to share with you really started in high school. I went to Randolph-Macon Academy, which is a college prep school, and this is something that they taught us at that level to get us ready for college. And it's actually something that's helped me in my career now. It's helped me in the military and being a pilot. And what it is the ability to critically think and to think for yourself. It's not so much, this person told me something, so I'm going to take it as word. It's like, this person told me something, so let me fact check it. Let me read various sources, see if similar people are coming to the same conclusion. What is the background of these people? What is their education like? It's just the ability to take information, process it, and then formulate my own conclusions about whether I believe it, or I believe it partially, but this also applies. Does it operate in a shade of gray, or is it black or white? We all need to be critical thinkers, because critical thinking seems like it's kind of been a lost art. It seems, just like from the people I've been around. I'm not saying about anybody who's listening to this, but like the news puts something out and then people just believe it and take it as word, on face value. Like, it doesn't seem like people, at least the people who comment on the Facebook articles I've seen or I've heard in passing and stuff like that, they just, go with what the news says or go with what Facebook says, and then they quote it and repeat it as if it's gospel. And a lot of that stuff has misinformation in it, and it has partial truths, and it's written or spoken to favor a reality that the author wants to create. So we have to be careful of that type of stuff. Like I said, those are all constructs of the Matrix. They're meant to build the reality the way that the author of that information intends for it to be viewed. And another outlet is social media. So we got media like the news, newspapers, stuff like that. Then we have social media like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat that try to create this reality that people are this or that, but it's not real as well. Um, Things are not always as they appear. Like on Instagram, like sometimes you see people they always seem like they're on vacation, or you see these beautiful individuals with perfect physiques and stuff like that, and we all look at those things and we're like, oh, I want to achieve that, or I want to have that and stuff like that. But if we took a further look into that, and just look behind the picture and the images and stuff like that, we'd be able to see that things aren't always what they appear. um Oftentimes, the cars are rented, the jewelry's rented. um One of the things that I applaud this lady for doing was, I was looking on the internet, and she was also putting information out there for women, because the ideal body is something that is circulated around media and Facebook, social media, and everything. And women are definitely under a lot of pressure to look and act and be a certain way. And this woman was saying, things are not always as they appear. And she showed before a picture she took, and she had a body that a lot of us could relate to. She wasn't ugly, not by any means at all, but she had a body that we could all relate to. A typical, like, human being type body, just like an everyday type body. And then when the photographer was about to take a picture, she showed how she, arched her back a certain way, tightened up her stomach, and then the photographer took the camera at a certain angle, and then it showed the picture afterwards, and it was like an Instagram model like type photo. Like it looked totally different from what she was originally showing. And the purpose of her doing that was to show that there's more behind the picture. There's angles, there's lighting, there's different ways that you can stand and stuff like that, that create a false reality. It's not real. People get surgery and stuff like that. They're not born that way. It's not real. So it's just another false reality that we have to realize, and take a step back and say, like, is this even real? Is this, I'm trying to obtain this, but, like, did this person even obtain this? We just have to create standards and measurements for ourselves, for our own lives, that we create. We don't need anybody outside of ourselves creating standards and measurements for us to live up to. We need to create them within ourselves. And if we create higher standards for ourselves, then all this stuff outside of ourselves doesn't matter. Because in order to achieve happiness, success, and all this other stuff that we're trying to obtain in our journey through life, we need to be pulling it from ourselves first. Because as we've discussed, your internal environment is reflected in your external situation, your external experience. So if you're unhappy with the way you are as a human being, or the way you look, or the way you feel internally, then, and you try to seek it externally, you're only going to be able to fake it, or replicate it, but it's not going to be the real thing. You might be unhappy in your body, so you might try to seek out happiness through relationships, or alcohol, or other type of drugs that you may ingest. But at the end of the day, all of that stuff wears off, and then you're back with your base feeling of not being happy. So we need to be less concentrated with the Matrix, being concentrated with the world, that the news and all these models and these people are trying to create, and be more focused with our internal environment, our internal situation, and create our reality from within and project that outwardly so that it becomes real. We live what we're talking about, or what we feel, or what we think. If we took a step back and focused outside of ourselves, meaning less individually and more externally, we will see that everything is not as it seems. This is like an egocentric view. And the way that they compare this in the Matrix is, they said like people a long time ago thought that the earth was the center of the universe, and that's very egocentric. That's ego driven. Like, the world rotates around us, the world revolves around us. At one point in time, a lot of us can relate to that. I definitely can relate to that. I'll be the first. But we need to look outside of ourselves, look at the bigger picture. It's not all about us. In our day-to-day lives, in our day-to-day functions, we kind of get drowned out in the fact that there is a world outside of ourselves. We get bogged down with like bills and life and things we got to do. And then on top of that, we're moving so fast and doing so much, we really don't have time to consider the things we're listening to. And then we kind of get caught up in the monotony and everything, and it just creates this confusion. But if we look outside of ourselves, outside of our communities, outside of our states, outside of our nation, we'll see that there's a whole different reality that we may or may not be getting the perspective or the view of. Like, they talk about poverty in America, but there's a lot of poverty going on around the world. There's people who deal with multiple levels of sickness. They've been dealing with disease on top of disease. They water shortages, they don't have food, all this other stuff. And when we're egocentric, when we're focused on ourselves, we lose scope of how blessed we really are, how fortunate we are to have what we have. Even if we don't have a lot, we have more than most people. You know what I'm saying? So we are blessed. You are fortunate at the end of the day. If you have a roof over your head, if you have breath in your lungs, you got two things going for you. You're starting off your day with. So anything else you get after that is, counted as blessing. Food, water. If you're able to go to work and provide for your family, and it's a meaningful job, or it may not be, but it's a job nonetheless. And if it's not meaningful, then look for a change of career. But we need to count our blessings, because the Matrix has us focused inwardly, has us focused on, our nation, our state, our community, ourselves. But there's a world outside of the Matrix. There's a world well, at times it's encompassed in the Matrix, because, the media at large tries to paint pictures of different countries or different people outside of the United States as well. But there's a reality outside of that, even, that we're not exposed to, that isn't projected readily, and that is created and intended to make us view things a certain way. It's an agenda. We have to ask ourselves. That's part of critically thinking. What's the agenda behind the information that is being put out? Like, what's the agenda of the person that's pushing this information out? At the same time, we have to also focus inward and seeking validation within ourselves instead of from the outside world, so that we can be what we're truly meant to be. Again, we talked about it a little bit earlier, creating that internal satisfaction with yourself, as opposed to seeking it externally. This is yin and yang. This is what we talk about: balance, the principle of polarity, and stuff like that. Like, we have to be looking outside of ourselves to know how blessed we are, and be observant of the fact that the world is bigger than just this lens that we're looking through. But we also have to look internally and know that, what we're seeking is already inside of ourselves. We just have to project it outwardly. We just have to live it in our external lives. And that becomes possible through knowledge of self. If you don't have knowledge of self, then how can you live up to who you're truly meant to be? If you were a king at one point in time and you got amnesia or whatever, and you woke up and for your whole life nobody told you were a king, you didn't remember anything, and you just lived as an ordinary civilian, you wouldn't be able to live up to your full potential because you don't know who you were. You're not aware of who you are. You may have all those qualities, you may have all the education, you may have all the money and the riches and stuff like that, but if you don't know who you are, then you might squander your wealth. You might not use your knowledge appropriately. You might not use your network or your connections appropriately. You might treat the people around you with disrespect and stuff like that. And we can see a lot of those factors exposed in life because a lot of us have forgotten who we are or where we came from, and it's not unintentional. We a lot of us don't know our history, and because we don't know our history, we're not living up to our full potential. We've been caught in the matrix and the narrative that has been, pushed out by the powers that be, and we're not living to our full potential. We're not being our best selves. We're not putting our best foot forward. Now, that's not everybody. There's some people out there that have found ancient knowledge, have been reading books, and have been made aware of who they really are, and who they believe themselves to be, and they're moving forward in life accordingly. And I salute those people. I'm on that journey to try to discover my lost history, who I am, and stuff like that, and live a purposeful life. Um, but I'm just saying it from the standpoint of I see it reflected a lot in history, especially in my line of work. So with all this being said, about the matrix and the construct that people are building for us as opposed to us building our own reality, whose reality are we living? And even more fundamental, what is reality? So we need to identify those questions as part of our process of critically thinking. So the definition of reality is the world or state of things as they actually exist, as opposed to an idealistic or notional idea of them. The key phrase in that definition is the state of things as they actually exist. So when you live in the matrix, or when your mind isn't open to the concepts and the minutia and the details of life and the history of who you are, you're living in a notional world. You're living in a world that's been created for you. You're not living in a world that, as things actually exist, as things actually are. You're living by the narrative that somebody else has created, somebody else has pushed out there for you to partake in. And if as long as we do this, as long as we live in this narrative, as long as we follow that agenda, we're not going to live according to our true potential. We're not going to be able to harness our true potential because we don't have knowledge of self. We don't know who we are, or we might be going 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction, because of lack of knowledge, because of lack of critical thinking, because of lack of awareness. You determine your own reality by your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, and the results you create. If you're familiar with my podcast, that's the TFAR model that I've referenced before. I picked up that model in a book that I was reading. It's thoughts lead to feelings, lead to actions, which lead to results. So your thoughts come from a host of things: outward stimulus, external or internal stimulus. And these thoughts that we get, based on the stimulus that we receive, they lead to feelings. And these feelings that we get generated by the thoughts we have received from our stimulus lead to us taking actions. And those actions lead to the results that we obtain. So if we want to change the results that we obtain, we need to start from the beginning and change the thoughts that we think. And then this is another shout out to the whole principle of how we talk about you need to be, cognizant of the internal conversation that you have with yourself, because your thoughts ultimately leads to actions, which ultimately leads to the results that you get in your life. So you need to be aware of the things that you're saying, the things that you're doing, because in thinking, those thoughts, you are creating your reality. And this is just one of the ways that, you know, you can draw a line from your thoughts to the reality that you live based on the T-form model. According to Immanuel Kant, no one can save us. We hold the key to our own success. And we've talked about that before. Um, Nobody's coming to save you. You're going to have to be your own savior. The people, the powers that be, whether it be media or social media, have created this matrix, this construct on purpose. It's not by accident. It's created on purpose, and we need to be aware of it. We need to look outside of ourselves. We need to be aware of the fact that there is misinformation being passed largely around, is being circulated. We need to critically think, look deeper, because if the powers that be are taking time to do what they're doing, there's a reason behind it. And we need to know what that reason is. We need to become aware of that reason. And even if we can't find that reason, we need to be aware of the fact that the information that's being circulated isn't 100% accurate. And then we need to dig deeper into finding the truth behind that information, so that the thoughts that we think, the feelings that we develop, the actions that we take, and the results that we obtain will be as pure as possible towards our goals and what we desire to achieve for our life. Because if our thoughts aren't right, then the results that we get and the reality that we create are going to be askew too, as well. They're not going to be pure. They're not going to be accurate. So we have to be cognizant of all that information. And Immanuel Kant is one of those philosophers that I was talking about, with Socrates and Plato, Rene Descartes, like all of those old school philosophers that we learn about in school. A lot of their theories and concepts still apply to this day. It's just you might have to look a little bit deeper. It might not be readily available on the surface, but if you look a little bit deeper, there's nothing new under the sun. A lot of these concepts still apply, and if you read your history, you'll see that these governments, these ancient governments, practically did the same thing that they're doing today, just in different form. And it's not only the government, it's corporations, businesses, commercials. I mean, it's all-encompassing thing. I'm not blaming the government or directing it towards the government per se. I'm saying, like, the reality that's been created around us, all in all, is something that we need to evaluate. Is this real? Is this true? The first key to change is realizing that we live in the matrix and waking up. That's basically the whole point of this podcast. Like, we live in the matrix. We have a choice to either wake up or stay asleep once we receive the information. Another important scene or part of the matrix is when Morpheus gives Neo the choice. He said you could take the red pill or you can take the blue pill. And one pill, if he takes it, it'll take him back to his reality. He won't remember anything that happens. But if he takes the red pill, I believe, if he takes the red pill, then it awakens him from the matrix. And he sees how deep the rabbit hole really goes. That's a reference to Alice in Wonderland. And of course, he chose to take the pill that awakened him. Once, he obtained the knowledge from Morpheus about, the matrix and how he was plugged in and everything like that. So it's a similar interaction between me and you. Like, I'm presenting this information to you. What you choose to do with it after you hear it is completely up to you. I'm not here to change your mind. I'm not here to persuade you. I'm not here to slant you towards any political party, any view on life, any religion. I'm simply here to present information. And once I present you with that information, you in turn have a choice. And you have the power to make that choice. Only you can save you. So if you think that the information I'm passing is BS, then so be it. Keep doing what you're doing. But if you feel that it's not BS and that it's relevant and there may be something to it, practice critical thinking and dive a little bit deeper and see what you can come up with and create yourself. Because at the end of the day, only you can save you.